Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, Literature Unveiled. So today's topic is Structuralism as Literary Theory. So here are some points that we are going to discuss in this theory, which are structuralism, Ferdinand de Saussure, the scope, and what structuralist critiques do. Okay, so structuralism was an intellectual movement which began in France in 1950s, and it's seen in the work of an anthropologist whose name is Claude Lévi-Strauss, and a critique who is known as Roland Barthes. It was imported in Britain in 1970s, but it attained widespread influence in 1980s. Okay, so now we come to its essence, and its essence is that we see that structuralists believe that things cannot be understood into isolation. They have always to be seen in a larger context to be understood, and this is what structuralists believe, and this is the major point of structuralism. Structuralists believe that if we have to understand one thing, we have to understand what it is a part of. For example, if we want to understand the good, we have to understand the bad as well, so that we might be able to understand good in a well way, in a right way. Okay, so structuralists believe that meaning is an attribute of things, that in literal sense meanings are attributed to things by human mind. The structuralists say that human mind constructs meanings of words. If we see the example of John Donne's poem Good Morrow, we are going to understand how structuralists tell us that we have to understand meaning in a larger context, and they cannot be understood in isolation. And in the role of Cambridge Revolution, we see that structuralists said that meanings can only be understood which is in text, and outside the text they don't need to understand anything. Cambridge Revolution was an opposite to what structuralists said, because Cambridge Revolution, they said that text has to be understood in isolation and not in larger contexts. Now we talk about Ferdinand de Saussure, who was the father of modern linguistic and structuralism, and he had synchronic approach towards language, in which he said that language as a structure could be studied in entirety at any time and in any time. So this was what synchronic approach actually is. And in diachronic approach it is opposite, because in diachronic approach we only study a period of time, and we don't study the time in entirety, as this also shows that his structuralist approach, because in structuralism we need to study in larger contexts. Here we see some radical insights of de Saussure. Firstly, he tells that there is a conventional connection between meanings and words, and then secondly, he told us that language is a system of signs, that no sign can be studied in isolation. We have to study each and every sign or a word in a complete context, in an entirety. Okay, now finally, Saussure has made two dimensions of language, which is one lang and parole. Lang refers to language as a structured system grounded on certain rules, while parole is the specific acts of speech or utterance which are based on these rules. And so we might also say that language is a set of rules, and parole, lang is a set of rules, while parole is the it is the act on those set of rules. Okay, and now as we know that Saussure is also known as father of science, he has given the sign theory, in which sign, signifier and signified are equal. As Saussure was the key figure of structuralism, we also see that how he has laid emphasis on how meanings are maintained and established, and on the functions of grammatical structures instead of the patterns and functions of language, which other linguists or literary critiques have done, like Claude Lévi-Strauss, etc. Okay, as they had talked about the origins of language. Now, three pronouncements which Saussure gave are meanings are arbitrary, they are randomly given to the words. Secondly, he said that meanings are relational, as they cannot be understood in isolation, which is also the major point of what structuralists believed. And thirdly, he said that language is what constitutes or explains our world, as the meanings are always attributed by our human mind, and they are expressed through language. Now we are going to study the scope of structuralism. As the Saussure's model was transferable, Claude Lévi-Strauss applied the outlook to the interpretation of myths. He said that we will find no inherent meaning, or no myth can be understood in isolation. So in order to understand a myth, we have to um, understand the whole cycle of myths that are constituted on that particular place from which that myth is originated from. For example, Oedipus. To understand the myth of Oedipus, he had to go through the myths of the city of Thebes, which were related to it, and he had to contrast the motives and symbols and themes of those, all the cycle of stories that were connected to Oedipus or the city of Thebes. And he also saw direct pairs, which are in terms of basic oppositions like animal and human, relation and stranger, husband and son, which we had to see in Oedipus Rex. Now we have to understand what structuralists actually do. They analyze prose narratives, the conventions of particular literary genres or network of intertextual connections, and these intertextual connections we might call them connotations, for example, because and. Then we see a projected model of underlying narrative structures, which is also the example saying universal structures. What is underlying universal structure? And in the third part, we see a notion of narrative as a complex of recurrent patterns or motives. Recurrent patterns or motives are repeating patterns or motives, for example, in drama, poetry, or novels, etc. Now, afterwards, we are going to see the second point in what structuralists do. They interpret literature in terms of range of underlying patterns within the structures of language. For instance, we also take the notion of my theme. My theme is a unit of narrative structure involving relationship between a character, an event, and a theme from which the myths are thought to be constructed. Okay, and then thirdly, we see that they apply the concept of systematic patterning and structuring to the whole field, which also explains that structuralists use systematic patterns to understand the culture from ancient era to modern age, or whatever be it. Fourthly, Barthes' method of analysis is to divide a story into 561 lexes or units of meanings, which he then classifies into 5 codes, seeing the basic underlying structures of all narratives. And these 5 codes given by Barthes are: the first one is pro-eretic code, in which this code provides indications of actions. For example, the ship sailed at midnight. Now the action is taking place at midnight, and we are being told so by the given sentence. Secondly, the hermeneutic code. It poses questions or enigmas which provide narrative suspense. For example, he knocked on a certain door in the neighborhood of Pell Street, which makes us wonder that who lived there and what kind of neighborhood it was. Thirdly, we see the cultural code, which contains references out beyond the text to what is regarded as common knowledge. For example, we see that Agent Ainsley's was the kind of man who would sometimes arrive at works in odd socks, which ponders us to think that agents are always well dressed, and why is an agent coming in odd socks? We see that agent is shown clumsy and odd in certain way, which is off the cultural code. Fourthly comes the semic code, which is also called the connotative or the link code. It is linked to theme, and this code, when organized around a particular proper name, it constitutes a character. Finally comes the symbolic code, which is also linked to theme, but it is on a larger scale, as to speak. It consists of contrast and pairing related to binary polarities. Binary polarities are opposites which cannot exist without each other, like good or bad, male or female, etc. These are the structures of contrasted elements which structuralists see a fundamental way or a human way of perceiving and organizing reality. So as we speak about conclusion of this literary theory, we see that structuralists have only focused that meanings cannot be understood in isolation, and they have to be related to the larger structures to be understood. And then the focus of structuralist here also retains to the structure and symbol and the design of narration. Thank you for sticking to the video till the end. Please like, share, and subscribe the video. See you soon. Bye.